Hello and welcome to a tutorial for the MesaSuite software. This is going to kind of focus on some of the more technical aspects on how to get MesaSuite to run entirely on your own computer locally. And to do that, we're going to need SQL Server Express, and we're going to need a virtual machine that's going to handle all of our Active Directory stuff. So, as you can see here, I have a Windows 10 virtual machine. And I decided to go with the virtual machine on this because it's going to better replicate probably what you're starting out with, which is just Visual Studio, and you have all of the projects here, but there's really nothing set up out of the box here to actually connect to something local. So the two things you're going to need is you're going to need a Windows Server 2019 ISO, and you're also going to need SQL Server Express. And I've already downloaded these things. I have SQL Server Express downloaded on this machine. It's very easy to find. You literally just go to Google, type in SQL Server Express, go to the Microsoft webpage for it, and you're going to choose the Express download now. Downloads a pretty small file, and that's going to take care of all that. And then, since I'm going to be doing another virtual machine for my Active Directory, on my local machine, I also have in my downloads Windows Server somewhere in here. So, with that said, I guess we can just start with the virtual machine, and we'll start with SQL Express. Now, I'm going to try to go through all these things as quickly as I can, but it is kind of intensive here and there. So this would be, again, representing your local machine. I'm going to go to my downloads, and I'm going to go ahead and install SQL Server 2019. And then here I'm just going to go custom because I like to go through each individual thing to make sure that it's not doing more or doing less than what I expect it to. Here you can choose whatever media location you want. This, I believe, is going to just download the install files. This isn't actually, we're going to be installing your databases. So since this is just my virtual machine right here in the C drive is just fine for me. I'm going to go ahead and hit install. Okay, so now that SQL Server has gone ahead and installed the installation center, we'll go ahead and click New SQL Server Standalone Installation. I've kind of noticed that the SQL Server installation steps here are all very retro. They haven't really taken the time to go through and update these, so it's just kind of weird the way these all work. But it is what it is. Go ahead and accept these license terms because I definitely read those. No, we're not going to use Microsoft Update. Absolutely not. It's going to go ahead and install these setup files and all the other things it needs to do. Okay. Okay, it's warning me about Windows Firewall because I went ahead and disabled it so that way I could use this computer like it's my own and I can actually pass through the local network nice and easy. Probably wouldn't advise doing that on your own PC, but to each their own. So everything looks good here. I'm going to click Next. And here it's going to go ahead and try to install a bunch of things that aren't entirely necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to uncheck these things that don't really seem to interest me. You're really not going to need these things for MesaSuite. These things, though, I would leave checked because that might help you with Visual Studio. More interestingly down here is this is where you're actually going to install your SQL Server and where it's going to run. So, if you have a more open drive or whatever, you can put that there. But again, this is a virtual machine that I'm just using, don't really care about. So I'm just going to put this right here in its default location. Right here is where you can name what it's called. Default SQL Express is just fine. For server configuration, this is stuff you don't really want to mess with. You can if you want, but I would highly advise just leaving these the way they are. And then here you're going to be able to specify what users have access to this. It defaults in your current user for the administrator. Otherwise, you can specify a local account to go with that as well, or you can add other users. And again, you have additional options for where you want to store stuff. If you change one, I would highly recommend changing them all. Have similar naming conventions as well. Again, more options for where you want to store things. Here you can specify how much memory SQL Server can use. Just a warning, if you set it too low, it's probably not going to work very well. So leaving it at default is generally okay. You can always disable the service later on once you aren't using it and you realize it's taking up too much, but I've never personally had that issue. And everything else looks good here, so I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And it's going to go through and start the installation. Okay, and when it's complete, it's going to look a little something like this. So, congratulations, you have installed SQL Server. I am going to go ahead and go find another program that's going to actually help us interact with the SQL database called Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And again, it's like the top one at the top. Shorthand for it is SSMS. And you just go ahead and download the most latest version. So now that you've done that, before we can actually install this, we'll need to restart the computer. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. Okay. Sign in. Now I'm going to go to my downloads and go ahead and install. And again, you can choose wherever you want to install, doesn't really matter, and I don't really care. So go ahead and hit install and let it do its thing. Okay, so once SQL Server Management Studio is set up, you'll be able to access it just going to your start menu and typing it in. And we'll be able to verify that SQL Server is running on our machine using this. Okay, once it's all set up, the defaults should be good to go. It's the computer name / SQL Express, or whatever you called it, and then Windows Authentication if you set it up like so. Go ahead and hit connect. And we should show that we're connected here with no databases. So that is the first half of what we need to do here. So now we're going to move on to the Active Directory side of things. So for that, we're going to need to go ahead and install Windows Server. I'm going to be installing Windows Server 2019. So really the best way to find this, and I'm going to use my actual real local machine for this, is to just literally type in Windows Server 2019 ISO, and you'll find the Try Windows Server 2019 right at the very top. And in here, we're going to go ahead and just grab the Windows Server 2019, grab the ISO. I mean, technically you're supposed to put in your own information, but you can really just put in John Doe and some fake information here and it'll work just fine. And then after that, you'll download the ISO. So I'm going to go ahead and use my workstation player to install the new one. So workstation player. And create a new virtual machine. For those who might not be aware, I'm sure all of you are, but VM Workstation Player is a free software program to use for personal use, such as this. So here I'm going to install my operating system later and go ahead and pick Windows Server 2019. And we'll just leave that as default. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the drive that I want this to be in. So I have my location selected here. Click Next. I'm going to go ahead and just allocate 80 gigs. Really not going to need that much for Active Directory, but 80 seems to be a good, happy number. And go ahead and click Next. And then I'm going to customize my hardware. For this, I'm just going to go ahead and assign 8 gigabytes of RAM. And then for my network adapter, in this case, Normally I would pick host only here, but in this case I'm going to use NAT because my Windows 10 virtual machine needs to be able to communicate with my Active Directory server. But if I was using my actual real local machine, I would choose host only, so that way it's not accessible to anything outside of my computer. Of course, you can change that how you want and be however you want, but for my normal use, I'd do host only. But again, for this, I'm going to do NAT. Go ahead and hit close and finish. Oh, and one more thing I'm going to need to do is pop in the disk. So I'm going to go over here to CD, DVD, use ISO image, and I'm going to go find my ISO that I downloaded, like so, and hit OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and run it. And this will install just like any other Windows installation. The difference, I believe, in this one is you'll have to pick which version of Windows Server 2019 you want. You want to make sure that you pick the one with the GUI. Otherwise, you'll be installing it like command prompted. It'll be very similar to a headless Linux, which is not really user-friendly when you're trying to do Active Directory things. You absolutely can do Active Directory things through command prompt, but of course, GUIs are made for a reason, much easier to use them. I'm gonna go ahead and do English, install now, and then I'm going to pick standard evaluation. Doesn't really matter which one you pick here, just make sure that you do desktop experience. This is what we were just talking about. Otherwise, you're going to install, just the command prompt version. So desktop experience 2019 standard evaluation. I'm going to accept these terms. Custom install, just like we always do. Create a new partition on our virtual disk. And click next. And now it's going to install Windows just like any other Windows installation is like. So one thing I would, unless you're going to be using this a lot and you want to stick money into development, which generally is not super advisable, but you can if you want, but you don't need a license key for this. You're going to get the evaluation period, which I believe is 180 days. And then after that, you can just reinstall it. You don't really need to keep any of these settings. It's, as you're going to see, like once you do this once, I mean, you're going to be able to do this super quickly every 180 days. And that 180 days in itself is a pretty long time. And you're only messing around with security groups and users and stuff. As far as the application with MesaBrook, when it's up and running, there's going to be other things going on like FTP, and the email servers all run off of that, and the web server and stuff. So in the case of production, we do have a license. We don't reinstall every 180 days. That'd be pretty disruptive. But for development, I would advise not purchasing a license for this and just reinstalling every 180 days and just doing the simple setup for Active Directory. So we're going to let this install and come back after it's done. Okay, so one thing you're going to notice like pretty much right away is that there aren't a bunch of like bloatware that Windows 10 installation usually has. It's you come in, boom, you're setting your password, right? Like you're not, you don't have this navigation bar up top or anything, or all these extra things. I mean, we just type in the new administrator password, hit finish, and we're in. Like, honestly, I feel like people should just run, Windows Server instead of running Windows 10 with all the bloatware in it. I mean, I feel like you just save yourself so much So, going to go ahead and log into our Windows Server 2019 user administrator account. And we'll do all this classic first time setup stuff. And Windows Server 2019, at first we'll always launch the manage server window that you'll see pop up here in just a second. For this one, we're going to go ahead and hit yes, because we want to be able to communicate with the server. However, in just a little bit, we're going to disable the firewall for this virtual machine. It's just so much easier that way. So, like I said, at the top left here, we have the server manager window. And this is generally we're going to be installing all your stuff and accessing your stuff, mainly through the use of this tools menu here. However, if we open it up, we see that Active Directory is not in here. So the first thing we're going to do is disable the firewall, and that's just going to be like how you normally do it. You know, you go into the start menu, go to firewall, however you normally access it. This is the way I found it to be easiest. I'm just going to go turn Windows to firewall off, hit OK. Now we don't have to worry about trying to get through the firewall on this virtual machine. It's totally not necessary. I'm also just going to make this a little bigger because it's a little small for me personally. Here we go, much better. Okay, so we're going to go to configure this local server so that we can give it a more friendly name, and we're just going to go to computer name, change, and I'm just going to call this DC, which stands for domain controller. Hit OK. And we're just going to restart the server. That way the name is updated. And we'll log in. And we'll get our server manager window again automatically. And I'm just going to check this don't show again because I really don't care. And now we're going to go to add roles and features. Click next. Role-based or feature-based installation. Select the server, and then we're going to click DNS server. It'll pop up just to make sure that you want to install these other tools to go with it, and we'll hit add features. And it's going to warn us that we should have a static IP on here, so we can do that real quick. So we'll go to our network settings, go to our adapter, right click on it, properties, IP version 4, properties, and then we're going to use the following IP address. And for that, we're just going to open up command prompt and figure out what it is right now. And it looks like it's 192, block 192, 168, 128, 131, I think is what it was. Oh, 126, 131, okay. And then that is the right subnet mask, and then our default gateway was 192, 168, 126.2. And then we can just set our DNS server to Google's DNS server, which is 8888. And then for the alternate, we can do 4, and 4. Okay, now we have a static IP. And then we're also going to do Active Directory domain services. And then here we're going to do add features. And I believe that's all we need for this. Hit next. Hit next again. Next. More information about Active Directory domain services. Next. Check the restart destination server automatically if required. And yep, that's fine. And we'll hit install. And again, we're going to wait while it goes through and does this installation process, and there will be some configuration we have to do after this. So we'll pause here again and pick up when it is done. Okay, so it is all finished up. So we're going to go ahead and hit close. All right, I just realized that I wasn't capturing the cursor at all in the entire first part of this video. So sorry about that. I thought it would have captured it on the virtual machine because it's a program and not the actual mouse, but apparently that's not the case. So it's on now. Sorry about that. Anyway, continuing with our configuration with Active Directory domain services, there's a little exclamation point here with this flag, and it's just telling you, hey, you need to do some stuff with your Active Directory. So first thing we need to do is promote this server to be a domain controller. We used that word earlier. It's pretty much saying that this server is going to be the controller and host all that information that's necessary for Active Directory. So I'm going to go ahead and promote this, and there's some information we have to put in here. So for this, we're going to add a new forest, and you can call this whatever you want. Generally, it's kind of like a web domain, right? That'd be mesabrook.com. It could be, yourusername.com or whatever. It doesn't even have to be .com. It can be whatever you want. So in this case, I'm going to do AD for Active Directory .local. Simple enough. And I'm going to hit next. And then in here, this all looks good by default. So in here, we're going to put in this password. I don't actually know what directory services restore mode is. I assume if something happens to your Active Directory configuration, you can use this password to get back into it. Hit next. This is just saying, hey, we can't find this server in your DNS configuration, but because this is a DNS server, we're just going to have it do it automatically by leaving everything here alone. So we're going to hit next. We don't have to worry about NetBIOS, so we're just going to leave this alone. Hit next. This stuff I would not recommend messing with. I mean, it's right in your Windows directory, so we should probably just leave this all alone. Review everything. Everything looks good to me. And this is pretty much just saying everything looks good here. I'm going to hit install, and the server is going to go ahead and turn this server into an Active Directory domain controller, and then it's going to restart after that. And then after that, we can do some MesaSuite specific configuration. So we'll go ahead and let this do its thing. I'm going to pause, and I'll come back when it is in the process of restarting. All right, so the actual installation process is finished, and it's just warning us that the server is about to shut down by itself, and there it goes. So the server's going to restart. It's going to take a little bit of time because it has to do all that first-time configuration for all of the Active Directory stuff, and then we'll be able to log in and, again, start setting up some MesaSuite-specific configuration. So I'll be back after we're signed in. So Windows has finished configuring itself, and one thing you'll notice when you get to the login screen that's different is now you have your Active Directory domain name in front of the username, which is AD. It was ad.local, AD is your domain. So just kind of a cool thing to notice. So I'm going to go ahead and log back in to our server, and of course going to load up Server Manager. Now, by default, right now at the time of this filming, MesaSuite's default passwords when you create users are pretty much a GUID, and that doesn't meet Windows complexity requirements. So we're going to go ahead and turn off Windows complexity requirements. So the bit that I just went to there was under Tools, and then I went to Group Policy Management. Then here we're going to go into the forest, to the domain, AD local, and then here I'm going to go to default domain policy, and I'm going to right click and hit edit, and that'll bring up my group policy management editor. And from here we will go to computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy. And in here we have password must meet complexity requirements. It's enabled. Double click to open that, move this to disabled, hit apply, and now the default MesaSuite passwords will be accepted. After that, I'm going to close these two things there. Everything should be saved. And now I'm going to go to Tools, Active Directory, Users and Computers. Maximize this, go into my AD local, go to my users, and here's all the users that you have in your domain. So I'm going to add the MesaSuite group. This is where all of your users that are added for MesaSuite are going to reside in. So I'm going to go right click, new group. Group name, I'm just going to call this MesaSuite users. You can call this whatever you want, but this is most clear. Hit OK. And just for demonstration to kind of show you how this is going to look when you are actually adding your own. And in fact, we already have to do this. That way we can log in ourselves. Right click, new user. And I'm just going to go ahead and put in a first name, last name, and then my user logon you can see is CSX8600 at ad.local. Hit next. Going to put in my password. Uncheck the user must change password at next login, and check password never expires. Hit next and finish. So now we have my CSX8600 user. I'm going to double click on that, go to member of, and I'm just going to add myself to the MesaSuite users group. And you can type in a partial name and hit enter, and it should show up here. If not, it'll ask you to search for it, say it found duplicates. Hit apply and OK. Now I have a user in my MesaSuite users security group. And you can see all the users that are in here by going to MesaSuite users, members, and you can see everybody who's a member of this group. Okay, so you have at this point successfully set up SQL Server on your local machine, and you have also set up a virtual machine running Active Directory. Now we have to connect all these pieces together. So with Windows Server 2019 running in the background, I'm just going to minimize it, and now I'm going to switch to my Windows 10 virtual machine, or in this case it would be your local machine. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and just create a new database here. I'm going to call it MesaSuite, and I'm going to hit OK, and we have our new database. Now comes the fun configuration part. So I'm going to launch my Visual Studio 2019, go into my MesaSuite solution. All right, and once we're in here, we're going to have to go through each one of the APIs, the OAuth project, and the MesaSuite project. And at the time of this filming, there's no tool to automatically do this for you. It is on my radar to do this because it is pretty tedious and cumbersome to have to change all these values. So we'll just start top down. API MC sync. We'll go into the web config. And in here, we are going to set our SQL provider and our connection string for the SQL provider. This one's pretty easy. There's only 2 keys you have to set. So for this, I'm just going to build my SQL Server provider project. And once that's done, I'm going to right click, open folder in File Explorer. I'm going to go into my bin debug, and here is my provider. So for each one of these, I'm going to copy this path, backslash, and then I'm going to copy this DLL name, like so. And then for our connection string, since I used a Windows authentication, I'm going to use a connection string that'll allow me to use that, so I don't have to specify any credentials, and it's going to work across the board here. So for this connection string, I'm going to do data source equals localhost, semicolon, initial catalog equals MesaSuite, which is the name of the database that I made. And then for the last one, we do integrated security equals SSPI, and hit save. Hey, what's up? It's CSX from the future. Just so you know, with these, you actually have to do a backslash SQL Express or whatever you named your instance from. Turns out I missed part of that, so just make sure you go to each one of your configs that use this and make sure that you put SQL Express at the end of each one of these. Whoops. And since I'm going to be using this in all of the API projects, I'm going to go ahead and copy these because it's going to be the same. And I'm going to go to the web.config for API system, find the same keys here, paste them in. And for the OAuth project, I'm also going to go to web.config, find them here and paste them in. I'm going to go back up to API system. My LDAP address is going to be the IP address of the virtual machine that I have, and just to make sure that I can see it, I'm going to ping it. So I'm going to go do my IP config again and open up command prompt here, and I'm just going to type in the address, and looks like I can reach it. So my LDAP address is 192.168.126.131. The LDAP container is where all of the users are going to live. So generally it's going to be the same if you've configured everything like I have, but if you did something a little different, I will show you how to find that information. So you go to Tools, ADSI Edit. This is in Windows Server 2019, by the way, your domain controller. Right click on ADSI Edit, connect to, and then just hit OK. Go to your default naming context, DC AD DC local. So this is that AD.local that we set up. You'll see users here, it looks familiar. And this is actually what you're going to need. This is where all of our users live, right in here. So we're going to right click on this and click properties. And we can see that the distinguished name is CN equals users, comma, DC equals AD, comma, DC equals local. There's lots of resources on how to do these things called LDAP queries that use these kinds of things. You can look it up, tutorials online, but for these purposes, just to get things going locally, this is what you need to know. So I'm going to go back to my Windows 10 machine, and I'm going to put that information in. So CN equals users, DC equals AD, DC equals local. My group name is going to be that same group that we set up in Active Directory users and computers, which was our MesaSuite users. So I'm going to put that in here. For our LDAP user, this is going to be a user that has access to be able to manipulate user account passwords and their memberships and all that kind of stuff. So in this case, generally in a production environment, you want its own user, but I know that the administrator account has that kind of access. So I'm going to put in the username and password for that account. In this case, I made the password the same as the username. And then for all of these, I know that the OAuth has the same information that it needs. So I'm going to go to OAuth, web.config, and paste all those in here. Now, I believe, yes, so if we go down, we can see everything after the unobtrusive JavaScript enabled. This is all custom MesaSuite configuration. So these pre-shared auth username and passwords and OAuth username and passwords, those are all defined in the README for the repository. The OAuth host is probably going to be different for everybody. So the way to get your OAuth host is to go to the OAuth project, go to your properties tab for it, and I'm just going to actually go like this. OAuth, here's your URL. I'm going to throw that in there and get rid of that last backslash. So it's my http://localhost and then this port number. Likewise, on my actual OAuth web.config, I believe, nope, that's all the configuration we need. So we got allowed IPs, that's our IP version 6 there, username and passwords, those are all great for default. I believe these point to API system, so the port numbers are the same as you can see here. These are comma separated lists, so that should all be good by default. I think this is all completely ready to go. Last thing we will need to configure is the MesaSuite app.config, and there's far fewer keys in here, but we still will need to change some of these things. So in here, we're going to do debug resource writer instead of release resource writer. So that's going to allow us to specify which hosts we want to point to. In this case, we want it to be local. And then for an additional key here, I'm going to do add key mesasuite.common.debug resource writer .host .mcsync. So this is going to point to our, I'm going to do value. This host is going to point to our API mcsync. So I'm going to left click on API mcsync, grab our URL here out of the properties, paste that in here, get rid of that slash. And likewise, we're going to do mesasuite.common.debug resource writer.host.system management. And the value here is going to be our API system. Grab the URL from here, get rid of that slash. For our version URL, we're going to want to have it check against our local API. So this is actually runs off of the same API here. Our MesaSuite version runs off the mcsync API. So I'm just going to copy and paste this like so. And then our auth host, we're going to want to point to our OAuth project here instead of the live authentication. So I'm going to copy and paste that in here. And again, get rid of the slash. And you can see everything is running locally. Now we're going to want to make sure everything starts up in the right order and everything is running. So going to go to our startup projects. We're going to run multiple projects at the same time. So we're going to want to make sure that we run OAuth first. And go and click start. Then we're going to want to run all of our APIs that do not require authentication. So mcsync at the time of filming is the only one that doesn't require authentication. Then we'll want to do the APIs that require authentication, so API system. And lastly, MesaSuite will start up after all of that. And hit apply. All right, now that everything's set up, with any luck, it'll work, but we haven't set up the database yet. So in order to do that, we'll have to go to our sandbox and yet again edit another app.config, but we will just need to go to our, since the sandbox runs off of the web projects, we have all of our app settings already set for them. So we'll just need to go in and copy and paste those over. And then in our sandbox, all we have to do is just do our schema.deploy. And what this is going to do is going to go through each database table and automatically create everything for us. Now this only works on a fresh database. If you need to make updates to the schema after you already have one, you should be using a migration under the data migrations project, but you'll need to do that anyway because there's already a production environment out there. So this top line here is just to make sure that the web models project loads, and the deploy should make our database for us. So let's go ahead and run this. Right click on sandbox, debug, start new instance. And we're all finished. Doesn't take long at all. Hit enter to exit that, and we're back here. Okay, so now that we've deployed our schema, I'm going to comment this out and then run our loaders to load any database objects into the database. So comment out schema.deploy, put our loader controller in here, initialize and process, and run our sandbox again. Right click, sandbox, debug, and we're done. Now if we go ahead and take a look at our SQL Server Management Studio, open up our MesaSuite database and our tables, we can see that this is all filled with tables now, and any of our loaded records are going to be in here. So if we right click, for instance, on program and we select the top 1000 rows, we should see that the programs that are loaded through our loaders are indeed in here. At the time of this recording, it's just system. Okay, so we know our database connection's working. We have all our records loaded in. Now what we need to do is actually launch the thing. So I'm going to go up here, hit start, and it's going to launch both of the APIs, the OAuth project and MesaSuite. It's going to do all that in the background, and we'll see MesaSuite pop up. So here are the web pages for the APIs. You can just minimize these. These aren't really necessary. In fact, there is a configuration within the project to not have those appear. Have our MesaSuite here. And we have our dashboard, and everything is running locally. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And it will default with our client identifier and our redirection URI, which is totally normal for MesaSuite. However, if you have already been running MesaSuite on your local machine, you may have to come in here and temporarily change your client ID, or actually get rid of it within your registry. It's located under, you go into regedit here and hit OK using the run, and then you go HKey current user, software, Custom Productions, MesaSuite, and you'll find the client ID here. Just cut that out and then hit OK, and then when you're done, paste that back in so you don't lose your registration with MesaSuite. So that's how you get this register screen to show up. Otherwise, it's probably not going to. This register screen isn't going to appear, and you're going to get unauthorized client. So I'm going to log in with that username and password we set up in Active Directory earlier in this video. Hit register, and here we see our MesaBrook login page. So put in the same credentials that we put in before, and we're logged in. So we can see that we don't have the system management icon on here. So the way to fix that is we will have to go into our security tables here, and we're going to select the top 2000 rows here, and we can see that system management is program ID 1. Select top rows here, see user ID is 1. So I'm going to go here, edit top 200 rows, user ID 1, program ID 1, and now within a matter of seconds, we should see the the system management icon pop up here. At the time of filming, it is still labeled user, but it is the system management. And we're able to access everything we need to. So that concludes how to set up the SQL Server, how to set up Active Directory, and how to connect everything together and get MesaSuite up and running for you. So do appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and happy coding.